Good evening, everybody. My name is Andrew. Background, fairly extensive. Worked in law enforcement, both federal and local many years ago. Served in the Army, active duty, Guard, and Reserve. Put together a number of land navigation trainings while I was in service. And when I came out, continued to enjoy being out in the woods and navigating in the woods and doing all the fun things that you can do in the woods that associates with hunting. And started putting together a number of land navigation seminars and periods of instruction for the hunter education program. We had ourselves our first in-field 2-day training about 4 years ago now, and it was literally the last day that we could get training out before the state shut down for COVID, and have been working to get the program up and running again since then. So we've got a lot of material to present tonight. We did one of these presentations about a year ago that was fairly extensive, that we tried to cram a bit much information into. And this is supposed to be an overview of the land navigation, a 50,000 foot view, if you will, to give you some broad general information about land navigation and the different techniques and key things you need to know about. We've broken this down into 2 parts. The first part tonight being map reading, and the second part will be basics on compass, GPS, and plotting that coordinate on a map. But other than that, that's where I come from. I appreciate Lieutenant Elliott helping facilitate this. Without him, we wouldn't be able to reach the numbers that we are reaching tonight. About a year ago, we had about 300 students and attendees join us. Tonight, we are closer to 600. So we wouldn't have the opportunity to reach out to the hunter community as well and as broadly as we are right now if it wasn't for the game wardens, the state Fish and Wildlife, facilitating this for everyone, not just here in California, but across the United States, as well as making these resources available to the public online through the YouTubes for folks to find and follow later on. So
awesome.
LT, I'll
let
you,
screen.
Yeah, I will share right now. If you're just hearing me, I apologize. I'm assuming that you guys can see me.
I think everybody's able to see and hear you just fine.
Excellent.
And we're getting some really good comments while you're getting into share screen mode. I just want to, there's a couple questions already in the chat and in the Q&A. And so, yeah, there's, in addition to GPS, compass, map, will navigation by wristwatch also be covered? We're going to be doing some of that. I think maybe we can address that in the following webinar next Tuesday. So with that being said, take it away, Andrew.
I appreciate it. So one of the things I do, I try to make this as entertaining and as fun as we possibly can for some material that can be relatively dry. I like to, when I have meetings, put a special scene behind me. And if you can see me and if you recognize the scene at some point, you can throw it in the chat. That gets you a brownie point, which is good for use just about nowhere. But we can keep this a little light and entertaining. Everyone see my live one screen? Let's get into this.
We got it.
So again, my name is Andrew. I'm not going to make you suffer through my last name. It's an old French name. My email is there on the screen for you. I encourage you to take that down. What I will do is, for anyone who wants these slides after the presentation so that they can have the material to review themselves, as well as all of the resources that I kind of cover in here, I'll send you a Dropbox link. If you contact me, send you a Dropbox link with that material so that you can retrieve it and review it later. This is our basic land navigation survey. It is a QAD version, quick and dirty. Tonight, our basic, we're just going to be covering map basics, which is going to be about 55 minutes in length. Part 2, next week, we'll be covering compass basics, programming the GPS, and plotting your location on a map. using those coordinates that you got out of the GPS. Reference materials that we use to put this together is Wilderness Navigation. It's one of the best books that I have come across since starting this. I don't recall if there's an e-reader version out there, but it's still fairly easy to get your hands on the text version, which I recommend. If it sells on Amazon, you can buy it directly from, I think it's the press, was it Mountaineer Books? Mountaineer Books, yes. Just Google that and it'll take you directly to the printer and distributor. The good old-fashioned U.S. Army Field Manual, which, they break it down and make it simple for infantry guys like me, and the good old U.S. Army Graphic Training Aid. They used to call it Don't Get Lost, but again, it gets right to the basics. A lot of this material will be available to you if you email me. Our learning objectives tonight is to review the tools for reading maps, identify and read a map legend, identify terrain features on a topographic map, measure distance on a map, and where you can buy and print maps from. And again, you got my email there. Just shoot me an email if you want the material. Shoot me an email if you want to be my friend. If you want to do that, there's a brief application. You have to send me 3 points that are interesting about you and at least one fun fact that I can use to blackmail later. Here are our tools of the trade. Listen, folks, you go out in the woods, you think you're prepared, you think you're ready for to do the Davy Crockett stuff, and sometimes you find yourself missing and short of some critical things real quick. And when it comes to wilderness navigation, or even if you're just going to go out for a walk near dusk in the local national forest and think that you're going to be able to find your way back, maybe in for a nasty surprise like this guy with a really cool beard has found himself doing a few times, stumbling in the dark, in the rain, and the cold and the wet. So part of being prepared for navigating in the woods and going hunting, or just doing having any sort of basic outdoor experience that really takes you off the beaten path and outside of that little community park, you want to have the necessaries. Here we see what they call the individual map case. So this meets the first kind of cool, where it's cool looking, where it's got the camouflage and all this stuff and a place to hold your pen. It doesn't necessarily meet the second kind of cool factor, where it's fully waterproof. So even if you're going to put your map inside of a map case like that, you want to have one of those nice high-speed Ziploc bags that you can put fold your map up into and place inside to keep it protected. You want to have some form of a straight edge ruler so that you can measure distance or plot an azimuth. Some of the stuff you're going to be like, what did you just say? Is that French? It might be. But anyway, you need to have some form of a straight edge. It's always good to have some sort of cheat sheet, and I'll be emailing this to those of you who want to be my friend and contact me. It's always helpful to have some form of little cheat sheet. So when you're all high speed and hunting at like 14,000 feet in Colorado, and the oxygen is starting to, or lack of oxygen there is, starts to get to your brain, and you can't really add on your fingers and your toes anymore. It's helpful to have these references to get back, to fall back on, to remind you what you're doing. A little pocket compass that you can put in your map case. What this big blue thing we call a protractor. There's our Ziploc bag. A mechanical pencil, preferably. Some 3x5 cards. You don't need to carry the whole 100 deck. Just like a half a dozen or so. And some sort of GPS receiver. And again, hey, listen, I have to include this disclosure. Just because you see these brand names throughout the presentation is by no means any form of endorsement. They are just visual aids that I probably stole from someone else's website on the internet. Protractors. This is one of those important things. Maybe you remember, what was it, 8th grade geometry or something like that, or do they even teach geometry in school anymore? Am I dating myself? Look, we've got 3 different types of protractors here. The one you see on the screen to the left is what the UTM grid reader, Universal Transverse Mercator grid reader. What did he just say? But anyway, you can see there are a number of scales on here, including what appears to be a square compass. We're going to go over that whole thing about the Earth being flat later. But you've got a square compass here, and the degrees kind of reversed. Over here on the far right, you have a protractor from Map Tools, which is again has the same variable scales on it. You've got the 1 in 24,000 scale that we're going to be talking about, the 1 25,000ths, the 1 50,000ths. Over here, you can see there are multiple scales on this side. In the middle, we have a military protractor that only has these 3, technically 4 different scales on it. 1 in 50,000ths, 1 in 100,000ths, 1 in 25,000ths, and 1 in 250,000ths. Look, I'm not expecting you to remember any of this. And again, there is no pop quiz at the end, except for if any of you in the crowd are former or active duty Marines, you can just go ahead and like do a Semper Fi or a hoorah there in the chats. Is there? You guys are only going to be required to identify your shapes and colors at the end of the presentation to make sure that you can proceed. You're fit to proceed on to part 2. Anyway, we've got our protractors here with variable scales that we will cover and discuss how these scales relate to the different maps that you are going to be coming across and using for your land navigation. And there are different types of maps that you're going to come across. You're going to come across what are called land management maps. These are things that back in the day when old George Washington was out plotting and surveying the frontier, they were surveying for townships, and they were doing it in mile squares, and a township being effectively 36 square miles. If you look at most incorporated cities, especially those across the West, and you do the little Google, the city name, and go to the Wikipedia, and they tell you like what the city's total square mileage is, it's usually, you'll find there's somewhere in around 32, 36 square miles, because of these types of land management maps and surveys that were done back in the day. You're going to come across recreation maps. And these are the kind of like high speed, low drag, first kind of cool maps that I was talking about that you're going to find at REI or your favorite local independent outdoor retailer that they will sell you. It's got like that really cool waxy type paper feel, and you open it up and it's got all the trails and it shows you like, hey, this is like Spooky Hollow and this is where Eagle Rock is at and all this stuff. And you think you're going to go out in the woods and it's going to get you from point A to point B, and it's not even worth the paper it's printed on unless you're going to put it on a poster board and hang it on your wall. We're going to discuss that. Sketch maps, this is the kind of thing that, you run into me in the woods, like, hey, how do I get here? And I pull an old envelope and sketch out, hey, turn left at Spooky Hollow, and, straight on to Second Star to morning. Guidebook maps, this is like, dating myself again, but you can still get them at AAA, kind of like the atlases of the day. And, you break out the old Thomas guide, or when I was a patrolman and I couldn't remember where the dispatcher was trying to tell me, and I'm like looking at the index. Topographic maps, and this is what we're going to be focusing on, if you can tell, because hey, that's what I've got in bold there. Some map basics, and again, this was where we need to make sure that we're on the same page when it comes to like these recreation and these special maps that you're going to come across at your local outdoor retailer that looks really high speed, low drag, meets first kind of cool, but isn't worth the paper that it's printed on. Understand the scale of map is just ratio between measurements of the map and the measurements of the world. Common maps that are produced by the USGS, that's the United States Geological Service for wilderness travel, is what we call the 7.5 minute series. 7.5 minutes is equivalent to 1/8 latitude, longitude, and latitude, or 1 in 24,000 scale. A 15-minute series, i.e. 2 7.5 minute series for my Marine friends out there. These are large maps that cover a large area, and specifically for like Alaska, or if you get over into Canada, where you can still get some of those things, because our umbrella and sphere of influence extends over Canada. You can get some USGS maps for those large areas. Now, the rest of the world uses typically 1 in 25,000ths and 1 in 50,000ths scale maps, and we use typically 1 in 50,000 scale maps in the military, because they still try to like hammer, use the metric system. Also, again, military forces operating around the world want to be operating with our allied and partner military forces. They're going to be using 1 in 50,000 scale map. But you average Dick and Jane Joe who are out treading through the woods here in North America, and for the purposes of instructing this class and typical type of maps that you're going to find available through the USGS, we're going to be dealing with 1 in 24,000 scale. Now, you're going to come across, like I said, those high-speed, low-drag maps that they sell at the outdoors, outdoor wilderness wild store that you're going to go out there and get your, your really ultralight backpack and your cool rain gear from, and it's going to have, some really wonky scale factor, like the one I've got here, 1 in 126, 720 scale. Again, you're not going to find anything that's going to work for that. And short of like putting it on your, your dorm room wall, so you can say, hey, look, this is where I've been. It's not worth the paper that it's printed. Looks cool, but don't bet your life on it. Again, for those few of you on this Zoom meeting who, like me, believe that the world is flat and what we're just hearing from media is all propaganda, I am required to tell you that it's hard for me to say, it's round, okay? And for the sake of understanding how mapping is done, maps are effectively a two-dimensional representation of this three-dimensional object. And what you need to understand is we've got what we call the prime meridian that cuts the world in half, north-south. And we got the equator that cuts the world in half, up, down, east, west. Our measurements, when we're going to be talking about our measurements from the equator and the prime meridian. Now, for what it's worth, we are not going to be talking about longitude and latitude any more than what I'm going to say right now on these diagrams. You see longitude and latitude. The easiest way to remember it is longitude is a long way around the world. You're walking east, west, and latitude is like climbing a ladder going up and down, north, south. Beyond that, we won't be revisiting that again. But you see the big square here that is, the earth filleted and laid out, almost Hannibal Lecter style. There's a grid pattern that's laid over it. And that grid pattern is called the UTM grid, Universal Transverse Mercator. I didn't come up with it. I wish I would have, to try and impress people at cocktail parties to make them think I'm smarter than I actually am. But the world is divided up into these segments here. You can see as they get smaller and closer to the 0 degree angle here, the equator and the intersection of the equator and the prime meridian, they are almost perfectly square. And then as you go in the north or south direction, they start to stretch out. Now, we look here, we've got this little, LT, can you see my cursor, or am I just kind of like waving my hands in space?
I got it, brother.
You can see my cursor? Outstanding.
Yes.
You've got this little zebra pattern right here on our UTM grid. Now, listen, there are many ways to read a map. All of them are wrong except for one, and I'm going to tell you now. You read a map to the right and up. Read a map to the right and up. Now, my Marines out there, I know the moment you got to either your Hollywood Station or Paris Island, they taught you your left from your right. I'm telling you right now, you lead. Did they teach you your front from your back? We'll go over that with you later. You're right and up. Repeat that, right and up, because you read this to the right, we've got 16, and we read it up, we got Sierra. This square plot of Earth is known as 16 Sierra. Now we've got the divisions of the Earth right here. We're not going to go over that. It's not really that, well, it's important, but not important for the sake of this discussion. 16 Sierra is a big square of Earth that is encompassed and further divided up into various subsections. Don't go looking for 16 Sierra, Foxtrot Lima, or Gulf Lima. This is out of a military publication. They change it because, you know, they don't want the Russians to know where Fort Benning, what's it called now? That's still Fort Benning in my heart. Fort Benning is located at. But further down in these smaller grid squares, again, 16 Sierra being the parent square, and so to speak, and the Foxtrot Lima or Gulf Lima are the smaller grid areas. They are further divided into the universal transverse Mercator system. You guys recognize this from, like, you know, school? It's America.
Yes.
Right? We got our East Coast here, we got our West Coast here, we got cold stuff up here, and we got spicy, delicious food down here. I love it all. Over here, we've got the 16 Sierra section that we were just discussing. Okay. For the remainder of our presentation, we're going to be discussing 11 Sierra. You see the blue line that boxes this in? That makes up 11 Sierra. That is 100,000 meter grid square ID. Okay, it's a big plot of land. You see how it covers. California is covered by 10 Sierra, 11 Sierra, 10 Tango, and 11 Tango. So in the 11 Sierra section, we should all recognize, again, there I go making assumptions. Okay, El Capitan, that's located in Yosemite National Park, one of the most beautiful regions of California. El Capitan is located within 11 Sierra, Kilo, Bravo. You see this square right here? This is all the information that you'll find within a legend on a map. So we're going big, like Superman view from being out in space, 50,000 feet, zooming on down. I'm going to back up to that slide right here. 11 Sierra, Kilo Bravo. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? 11 Sierra, Kilo Bravo. That's the square that we're going to be zooming in on and referencing here. So reading a map. One of the first things we notice here is that this was printed in 2018. It's always important to date your maps. Not date your maps, but date. Find the date reference on your map. You're going to confirm the minute series. Oh, look at that. They throw it right up there. El Capitan quadrant, 7.5 minute series. Reminder, it is 1/8 of latitude and 1/8 of longitude. You're going to see a bunch of red squares on these maps. Again, those are township sections. And oftentimes you're listening to podcasts where old Randy Newberg and some old timers are talking like, hey, I'm going to go hunt this section. They're talking about they're hunting a square mile section of a township. We've got the basic map datum over here. We've got our magnetic declination between grid north, true north. We've got our map scale. We've got our contour interval and the date that the vertical contours were measured. We've got our grid quadrants. We've got our road classification legend. We've got, hey, the big US national grid, USNG 11 Sierra, Kilo Bravo. Grid zone designation, 100,000 meter square ID. Now, look, okay. I know some of you, we talked about some of you Marines out there that you need to identify your shapes and colors, and you're sitting there right now. That's not a square. And remember, as you go further north on the latitude, they have to stretch things out. So even though it looks like a rectangle here, trust me, guys, it's square. Within those map legends, you are going to have some very, very important bits of information that you need to be able to reference to ensure that you are using the correct programming on your GPS. Big things here that we're looking for, the North American datum of 1983. You're going to come across that setting with your GPS. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't set your GPS to NAD 83. You're going to see WGS 84, the World Geodetic System of 1984. You're going to look for that in the menu settings. You can do it tonight after we get off this call together. Understand, boom, there it is. Also, 1,000 meter grid, 1,000 meter grid, universal transverse Mercator, zone system 11 Sierra. This tells you that you're using the proper map, that your GPS, that electronic aid, it is not a solver of all your life's problems. It is a navigational aid. It understands this information in that device and those satellites and the signals that it's sending down to you, and using all of Einstein's theory of relativity to adjust for timing. The satellite's moving like almost 18,000 miles per hour overhead. The signal beams are bending as it moves through the atmosphere. Your GPS has to work some magic so that it knows that you are within, effectively 10 meters of the desired location that it's telling you on that device. But if you are using the wrong settings in your GPS, and if you cannot read a map legend to program said GPS, the two will not meet in the middle. You're also going to see, again, your 3 norths. What did this guy just say? Yes, there are 3 norths you need to be familiar with for our purposes tonight. We got true north with the star. My Marine buddies out there, that's where Santa Claus lives with his little workshop, okay? You guys, you just continue to be good Marines and collecting up those toys for tots, okay? You're doing a great job. I'm proud of you. We've got magnetic north, which we're going to discuss in a moment. And we got grid north. So those are when we talk about those grids that we start putting on the maps that look like, prison cells, so where we keep bad people, and sometimes we lock Marines away in their barracks so they can't wreak havoc on nice little beach communities. Yeah, you'll notice in magnetic north is like, it's like going, whoa, something going on there, right? That tells us that, hey, in 2017, this GM, or grid to magnetic angle, you see the difference here between grid north pointing up and down, magnetic north pointing off, wild off in some direction, is a difference of 13.9 degrees. We're going to come back to that, but pay attention to it. And again, over here, you're noticing on this section here, we talked about the USNG square, 100,000 meter square identifier of Kilo Bravo. It changes for every section you go through. The digits, they don't repeat in the UTM zone of 11 Sierra. How are we doing on time? Holy moly. Time flies when you're having fun. You're going to see the scale. Again, big scale that we need to pay attention to, the 1 in 24,000 scale. That's the scale that you use, that protractor that we talked about earlier on in the presentation, to match up with the grid squares on your map. We got kilometer system, the metric system, we got the mile system, we got the feet system. Again, we've beaten into our heads in the military that we're going to use the metric system, but good old US of A continues to use the standard imperial system. Why? Because no one who uses the metric system have put the man on the moon yet. So America, here you'll see a contour interval, 40 feet. We're going to cover that when we start talking about contour lines. And know when Marines, when they send you out there to sweep up contour lines, you're not going to find them in the sand. And also they're using the North American vertical datum of 1988. That means when you're out walking in a field and it's starting to drop and down, up and down. Someone hasn't been out there to survey that area since the 80s, and things were wild. You're also going to find the name of the quadrant that you're in, not just Kilo Bravo, but it's going to have like a name. In this case, we're looking at Yosemite Falls, and you're going to see, like earlier we're talking about El Capitan, these quadrants all across the country, they got a special name to go along with it. So, hey, this is the adjoining quadrant angle. In Yosemite Falls, you date your map. I checked the date in 2021, and the road classifications, thick expressway, secondary, local roads, and 4-wheel drive roads. You want to know this so that, hey, if you wander off into the woods, walk in a particular direction, what you're going to set your panic azimuth to and have that in your pocket. So when you lose your mind in the woods, you point that compass in a certain direction, at least walk your happy self back to a road to try to get yourself out of danger. Big things you need to know when you're looking at a map. Again, my Marines, I was talking about shapes and colors. These are some primary colors for you guys, okay? Red being major roads, blue being water features, green being the color of shrubbery. Big ones, brown, contour lines and elevations. You're gonna have dark brown for index lines and a light brown for intervals. Black is for man-made features such as roads, trails, and buildings, things like that. We're going to look at Yosemite National Park, the Yosemite Falls area. Again, this is a 7.5 minute series map, 1/24,000 scale using North American datum of 1983 and the World Geodetic Survey, WGS of 84. I want you to notice here as our Marines out there date their maps, they change, they get older and older as time goes by, shockingly enough. In 1994, we had GM angle in the Yosemite Falls area of 16.3 degrees. 2017, the GM angle of 14.74. 2019, a GM angle of 12.9. What's going on here, guys? I thought, the Earth was static, flat, and static. But there is a iron-rich ball of liquid hot magma floating underneath the surface of the northern hemisphere. It used to be around Hudson's Bay area, but because again, we talk some really advanced science here. That we've got the crust of the Earth that we all like live on. You got the various layers of the mantle below and underneath there where it gets hot. Stuff starts to float around. Like I said, there's this ball of liquid, hot, iron-rich magma floating underneath the surface of the Earth. You're responsible for creating the Earth's magnetic field that protects us from the deadly rays of the sun. If we didn't, atmosphere would be blown off. We'd all get really bad sunburns and be fried. But anyway, it's on the move. In the 1700s, 1590s, when my people first got here in Nova Scotia, around this time, it was fairly stable up there in north of Canada. And then in around the 1800s, start to move. In the early 1900s, it took off and it's heading towards Russia. What do the Russians have to do with this? What do they want to do with our iron-rich ball of liquid hot magma? It's not for me to speculate, but I'm sure they're up to no good. Anyway, it's moving. And it's moving fast, which means these numbers are changing. And this is what your compass points at whenever you're using it in your little hand. It's not pointing where Santa Claus lives or he has his workshop with his helpful elves. It points at that magnetic north, and because it's moving every day, every year, that compass point is moving. So whenever we want to use a map and compass together, remember we talked about the three norths. We got true north, where Santa Claus lives. We got grid north, which is where these grid lines, for the most part, point to when you're looking at a map. And we got magnetic north that our compass points to. And somehow we've got to get all of that to work together. And we have to do some very basic math that we'll talk about later. I don't want you Marines to start sweating about math and stuff like that. It really doesn't require anything more than what you can do with pen and paper and counting on your fingers and your toes. Remember, I was in the infantry. I could do this. You can do it too. I believe in you guys. Stay with me. All right. Yosemite National Park, Yosemite Falls. What I have here are some examples of a 2023 1 in 50,000th scale map and a 2011 1 in 24,000 scale maps. You can see here by essentially terrain association right here, they're covering essentially the same areas. But because we're using different scales, this has a print of the 1 in 50,000 scale map from 2023, has a printable area of 8.5 by 11, or the basic like sheet of paper that most of you Marines get served your NJP on when you're like getting busted and down in rank. It comes on the 8.5 sheet size paper. So just think of that next time you have any questions about this. Maybe we can get captain's mass and you're out in fleet. Here we've got a 1 in 24,000th scale map. So that's at 18 by 24. So 24 inches, guys, that's 2 feet for those of you who missed that part in where they cover that, 8th grade. So these are different printable sizes, but they cover essentially the same area. 1 in 24,000 scales, 1 in 50,000 scales. So it tells you what part of the protractor you have to use on these maps to plot your position on the map, or to plot an azimuth on a map that you want to travel, or that's giving you a direction of travel that you want to move along. Reading a topographic map. We noticed here earlier that you've got these squiggly lines that look like spaghetti moving all over the surface of a map. Those are contour lines, right? And just for a quick review, you see all like the little black spots down here. Those are man-made features within Yosemite Valley, the buildings that we threw up there. So contour lines is the most common method of showing relief and elevation. Elevation up, relief down, okay? Contour lines represent an imaginary line on the ground above sea level, imaginary line. So like, hey, you're a boot and you just get to your new unit and they tell you, hey, go to supply and get me a box of grid squares. They tell you to go out, and when you're out 29 Palms, go sweep up some contour lines. Yeah, they're imaginary, right? But you know, you're good boots, you're going to do what you're told. There are 3 types of contour lines you need to be aware of. Index line, every 5th line, they're darker and they'll have the elevation label on there. Intermediate contour lines, they're a lighter color of brown that indicates 40 meters between those contour lines for elevation as your feet. And then you've got supplemental contour lines. So when you boots, you know, you party too hard at Camp Pendleton and they can't trust you to be around Oceanside anymore, so they transfer you out to 29 Palms and you're on a big flat surface out there. But, you know, there is still elevation and a relief, even though you're standing around in the middle of the desert where you can't have any fun. Those contour lines in a contour line interval, supplemental contour lines will appear as dots on the map. So yeah, even though you don't feel like you're walking uphill, you're still walking uphill a little bit. So here is the visual representation of this half dome. You know, one of the great landmarks here in California. You'll see the dark contour lines like right here to the west southwest of where it's labeled half dome, 8,600 feet in elevation. Now down here we got 6,600 feet in elevation. If we are to count these contour lines, you know, they will add up as they go along. In 8,600, 86, 86, on up, count up to 8,800 feet at the next index line. And in here you'll see the actual elevation, surveyed elevation of the top of Half Dome being 8,800. As you were 8,836 feet. Now, where the contour lines are spread further apart, it's less steep. When they get closer together, they get very steep. Imagine Half Dome in your head, and this, where the contour lines and especially index lines are all smashed together, that represents a cliff. You see here, we've got Half Dome Trail where the dotted lines are further apart. So it's a nice leisurely walk up. And then as you get to the steeper areas, they zigzag, they get squished together like an accordion. Those of you who don't know what an accordion is, think of a slinky. If I'm dating myself further, because I grew up with an Atari, a slinky was a kind of toy we had back in the 70s. But anyway, they get squished together, kind of like how a Marine when they wreck their car. It gets squished together to indicate that it's getting steep. And then you take on up to the peak there. Bear with me here, I clicked too quick. Anyway, contour interval represented here is 40 feet. The index interval is 200 feet. So like I said, you got 8,600 feet on that index line. This would represent 8,800 feet. That contour line right there represents 8,800 feet. And the exact highest point in Half Dome, again, 8,836 feet. Close contour lines together, cliffs. Marines, you can hurt yourself when near those. And the further apart they are, the more level and flat. The key terrain features that you need to be able to identify when you are reading one of these said topographic maps. and this kind of falls back on shapes and colors here. But we want to look for first here is like, look, it's labeled with numbers. Don't expect to count any higher than 10 here. So hang with me. Number one is our hill. Kind of looks like a scrambled egg, right? Comes together, boom, one hill. Number two being a valley, high point, low point. Number three being a ridge. You see here on this coming off this hill, we've got what kind of looks like this thing pointing out here. It's a ridge, not to be confused with a spur. Number four, we've got a saddle. And that's the area, the low area between two hills. Number five, we've got a draw. Those are the areas that go up between our ridges. We've got numbers, we covered number six is draw. Number five, I should have said as you were. Number five is a depression. Here it looks like that monster that they tried to throw Luke Skywalker and Boba Fett met his fate in Return of the Jedi. Great movie. Number six is our draw. Number seven is a spur. You see our ridge coming out here, and then we've got little things that flake off the ridge. Those are called spurs. Number eight, you see where these contour lines on the backside of this hill are coming together? That tells you that's a cliff. Danger. Number nine is a cut. So when you're driving along on the highway throughout California and hill country, and they just like blast that road right through that hillside, think of that, that's a cut. And then when you get on the other side of that hill, and driving on good old Caltrans, they cut through that road and then they filled in that ditch or that ravine so that you could continue to drive over at a high rate, unsafe speed in that Honda Civic that you're paying 28% interest on. Cut and fill. One of the ways that you can study this at home, privacy of your own room, or if you're going to do this in front of family members, tell them what you're doing first, but you can take your fist and put it in front of your face like that. And so you're going to talk into the microphone and look at the terrain features that are represented by your fist. The knuckle, top of the knuckles being hills. Between the knuckles, you got a saddle, right? You've got spurs that come down the fingers. You've got draws that come up. You got cliff dropping right off the set. You got ridge along the knuckles, right? You got draws that come up. We didn't already cover that in the palm of the hand here. You got your valley, and this is depression right there. So again, email me the slides available to you. You can sit there and study it yourself. But it's good to remember because, hey, land navigation is a perishable skill, as you were. Again, key terrain features, a hill. We got our two-dimensional representation and we got our three-dimensional representation right here. If you've never seen a hill before, or you're like, it's a completely foreign concept to you, here it is. You can't write the good LT afterwards and you get lost in the woods and stuff happens to you and say, I didn't tell you. Right here, we've got a visual aid representing the contour interval and relief and elevation available. Well, that's on a hill. You go up the hill, here you go. You go down the hill, you come down. You got valleys. And when you're looking at a topographic map, you're going to see typically within a valley a blue line that is fixed and permanent there. That typically will tell you that that is mostly a constant water source. And it is found at the bottom of other terrain features. You got a couple of hills on the left and right here, and you got a valley that runs through it. You see these little branches that are coming off of the water feature, the river here that we just talked about. When you see the line broken in a couple dots here, that tells you that it is an intermittent water source or a seasonal water source. So if you decide that you're going to go set yourself up on this, was it spur, ridge, something like that. You set yourself up here for a glassing point. Pop quiz, you can look it up. Set yourself up there as for a glassing point, and you drink yourself out of water. And you think you're going to go walking over here to find a water source to refill that 1 liter bladder that you took off into the woods with yourself. You're probably going to be in for disappointment and find yourself having to walk further. We've got representation of a ridge coming off of a hill. We've got a ridge line where you start putting several hills together. So 1, 2, 3 hilltops, ridge line. Here you're going to see to the right on this ridge line, this infographic, you've got a valley with a river running through it. You've got a road right there. You've got a cut for another road. You've got draws coming up these spurs. You've got a saddle right here. Why do you want to be familiar with these sorts of terrain features when you're looking at it on doing your map reconnaissance for an area? This is deer and elk. They like to, especially on the north side of a hill, they like to bed up in draws like this, where they can find a certain degree of cover and protection, have their back protected. They will like, because animals, mammals, they're lazy just like us. They're going to look for the path of least resistance. They'll follow those jeep trails that are cut into sides of hills. They'll come over saddles from one feeding area into another to seek forage and water and other good times that animals are looking for. Again, saddle, that's that low area between two hills. So when you're looking at a topographic map, you're going to see a hilltop and a hilltop, and then this hourglass shape indicating there's a saddle between these two terrain features. And why do you want to know that? Critters use those as major areas to traverse through when they're moving between feeding areas. Depressions, you'll see these things illustrated on a map. You're going to think, hey, it's a low area, right? So it's probably going to have water in it. It's going to be like a marshy area where you're going to find a lot of stagnant water and mosquitoes and things like that you don't want to find as a drinking source. Because just remember, just because you discovered this depression or this low-lying marshy area on a map for the first time, like you're, Robinson Crusoe or something like that, out, blazing travel like a pathfinder through the woods. The animals that we're pursuing, be it mule deer or white-tailed deer, for the most part, kind of sort of, even though they're like the lazier side of deer, and elk, they've been in these areas that we're going to be moving into to hunt for, like, tens of thousands of years. So they know from mama elk to baby elk to baby elk to baby elk, being communicated for generations across these animals, where all the low-lying areas are, where's the best place for them to go seek water, because they can drink unpotable, dirty water all day long. They also like to roll around in these water sources, contaminating it with their body. They like to defecate in it, they like to urinate in it, they like to get down and party in it. You don't want to have anything to do with it unless you got some serious water sources of water filtration and iodine. So even though, hey, this was like a water feature right there, it should be safe, right? Don't do it. Don't do it. Draws, again, we got the broken dotted line right here, intermittent water source. We got the water source right here. It's dry. Don't want to go looking for water where it's dry. When you're hunting the Western United States, again, come August, September, November, you think that you've done your map reconnaissance and e-scouted on Google Earth and all that, then you're going to know where you're going. So you only need to carry a limited amount of water. You're in for a rude awakening and a bad surprise. Draw. Spurs coming off between draws right here. You see the hilltop in this area coming down right there. Again, you're going to find cover, concealment, and forage for animals between those spurs and up those draws. Cliffs. Let's talk about cliffs for a moment here, because cliffs will kill you, probably faster than anything else out there. Besides, like, being in like a bit of the woods that are heavily populated with other hunters that are out to slam the big one in the 3 days that they have off from work to do it, and will shoot the first thing that they see and get them excited, including other hunters. So cliffs. Notice here on the illustration to the right, the yellow highlighted area, you're going to see the contour lines merging together, and then you're going to see these little eyelashes coming off here. This tells us that it is a cliff, but it's one of those Wile E. Coyote cliffs. When he goes off the side, he's going to hit a few things on the way down. You can add up how tall or how steep that cliff is by adding contour lines for 812s. This is a 120-foot cliff. Add it up over here. You got 1, 2, 3 contour lines for 812, 120-foot cliff. And again, we got the eyelashes right there letting us know Wile E. Coyote is going to hit a few things on the way down. And then we've got cliff B here, where the contour lines just merge together, and then there's nothing. You're going to go off the side here, and you're not going to stop until something breaks your fall, either a tree branch below or rocks that are waiting to take you to the other side. Again, figure A, we got a cliff with a slight slope. Again, you see converging into what they call a carrying contour. Again, just look for the eyelashes. So lets you know you're going to hit a few things on the way down before life snuffs out of you completely. And then B, just steep. Contour lines merge together. It's straight down. There's nothing to stop you except the bottom. Cuts and fills, like we were just talking about. You'll see cuts in the roads that you drive around. You'll see fills where good old Caltrans uses the earth that they pulled from that cut in order to ensure that the road, or in this case, the rail line by this illustration, smooth and level. You want to be able to look for features like this on your topographic map, cuts and fills. Because look, you know, when America moved west, they were laying a lot of rail line. Roads, highways came later. If you're out in the Western United States, and you know, if you're smart, before you go out into an area that you're going to hunt, you're going to look for key terrain features, principally roads that are to the east, west, north, south of you. You're going to write somewhere in a place that you keep safe and dry, what's called a panic azimuth, that you can pull out that compass to. And without even having to use math, because you might have a head injury, you might be like panic, you might be dehydrated, loss of electrolytes, suffering from a heat injury, heat stroke, or just the altitude's gotten to you. You know that if I point that compass to 90 degrees due east and just start walking, I don't know how far I have to go. I don't know what I have to cross to get there. I don't know what I have to do, like Hugh Glass style, look them up, to drag myself out of the wilderness to get to a terrain feature that may be an out of service rail line that closed 100 years ago. But at least I know it's going due north or due south. And from my earlier map reconnaissance, I know there's a logging community down here to the south of this rail line. Or there's a little village where they've got a shop at with some pokey bait up here that I can at least call for aid. I just need to get back to this line right here, and then I can worry about walking north or south to get myself walked out of there. So look for features like this on your topographic map to be able to inform the way for you to be able to perform some self-rescue if you find yourself in trouble. We got a gentle slope that's going downhill here, and the road that we talked about from our legend. We've got a steep slope. You can see what they call the contour lines coming together in little squares there to represent the farmer house and buildings. We got our convex slope that's converging that way. Again, black box, farmer's house, a steep convex slope. Covering these sorts of things because, you know, you slip and fall, you roll down a hill, you're going to break a leg, because just like me and my elk hunt this past Colorado, yeah, where did I learn to speak English? This past fall when I was hunting in Colorado, yeah, I'm that cool guy. We had thousands of feet of elevation gain during the day. Again, yeah, 8,600, 9,000 feet, thousands of feet of elevation gain. We had gone miles and miles and miles glassing, scouting, looking for elk sign. And I had a waypoint plotted way off over here where it's returned to camp. And I'd done a map reconnaissance, both using a topographic map as well as my e-map on my iPhone. And hey, we had these contour lines that just kind of like went nice and easy out in this direction. We're like, hey, yo, we've hit our limit of advance for the day. It's time to turn back and head back to camp. We're gonna get some stew. We're gonna eat some donuts. We're gonna, you know, enjoy ourselves this evening, get ready, hit the sack and get going next morning. Well, what I encountered, unbeknownst to my map reconnaissance and the good topographic map available on phone, was this 80-foot cliff that I encountered at the last moment. That was supposed to be just a nice, gentle, convex slope down to our camp area. Not on the map. If we had killed game earlier in the day and we're humping out an elk quarter and going along my predetermined azimuth to extract from the hunting area to get back to camp, you know, stumbling through the woods at night in the dark, and this cliff was there to greet us at, say, 10 o'clock at night. You know, I'm getting old. I don't bounce like I used to. I probably wouldn't have bounced back from that. So don't be deceived. Your map is not always accurate. Even though I was coming down this, you know, that cliff came up quick on us. It's a good slope down, but it shouldn't have posed a threat to kill us. I walked back the next day, took a picture. Yeah, so would have stumbled right through past those trees and gone right off the side. So be aware that even though you do a map reconnaissance, you get on Google Earth and you search a particular area that you're going to be hunting or navigating in, there's still threats that the terrain pose to you that it just come up unexpectedly and could take everything you got. So if you think you're going to be cool and just like move through the woods, like all tactical and whatnot with like just a red headlamp on, because you want to minimize your light signature, you don't want to scare the animals and things like that and have them bound in the area. Off trail, stumbling along, just go to white light. I mean, we're not fighting the Germans out in the woods or anything like that. Just safety first, especially when you're moving across varied and unfamiliar terrain. Don't be like this guy, and you know, at least I saw it in the daylight. So putting this all together, we have point number 1 or A to point number 2 B as our glassing area. And we're looking at our topographic map, and we want to set up a spot so that we can put the big binoculars up to us and we can look for, you know, that 8-point elk that's going to get us into Boone and Crockett and be famous on the Instasham. But you need to be able to understand that, again, 2-dimensional representation of a 3-dimensional object that has elevation and relief. Glassing out over a varied area. And, you know, for some of you Marines here, this should be starting to click here, because every Marine and rifleman, right? Direct line of sight, direct line of fire. Point 1, looking out to point 2, you're glassing this whole area over here. There's a lot of dead space where all the good things are likely going to be happening and passing underneath you. And you need to be aware of that. That just because you can see something doesn't mean that you can see everything. And there are various points all along the way here based on, again, the elevation and relief of the terrain, not to mention the vegetation and the shrubbery. You can see point A just fine, but when you get below these areas, point B and C, can't see squat. See D just fine, E, no, F, no. G, up there towards the top of the hill, you can see it, but when you get below this little hill here and the cliff drops off, you're not going to see anything that's going on down in the valley, where you've got a constant water source and probably a lot of good cover and forage for animals to just, you know, cruise on along there while you're up there eating your Pop-Tarts, frustrated that you haven't seen anything. So I'm going to burn through this. These are some online map resources that if you stayed to the end and you've put up with my dad jokes and just, you know, everyone needs to be warned about the Marine Corps, where they make that mistake and you know, join the Army or the Air Force. Online map resources makes this entire, paying for this entire event tonight worth it. I can't even believe that I'm giving this away tonight. So here we have the USGS map database. Again, this really makes the entire experience, shared experience tonight, worth it. It's not comic relief. It's not the dad jokes. It's this right here. This will get you access to every topographical map that the US has made and had for over 100 years. Map view will take you to the maps. Topo view takes you to this really cool little subsite right here. You go to either get maps or view and download. I bet it's because I set my camera to high definition. I wanted to make sure you guys got every single detail of this face. And it gives you this key search function right here. So if I type in Half Dome, California, it takes me right to Half Dome. And do you see on the right of the screen all these maps here that I'm scrolling through? We've got a topographic map that was first surveyed of the Yosemite area that dates back to 1897. If you're so inclined, you can click on that. It's going to open you up another window. And it's going to show you that map. Or you can scroll down to the latest map that was surveyed in 2021, click on it, and it will show you that topographic map. These are the same topographic maps that we were looking at earlier in the presentation. I swear to you, I'm not using DSL or dial-up. It's just, you know, again, on me for using the wrong setting and selecting high definition for my camera. It's beating up my upload speeds. You guys see the updated map right there in front of you, LT?
Yes, we got it.
Excellent, excellent. Now, as we, I'm screen sharing is paused. I'm gonna share, make sure I get back to my slide show. You got slideshow in front of you?
Not yet.
It's coming. I promise you.
Tell you what,
promise you guys.
Yeah, we got it now.
Excellent. Here you're going to have an addition, a little secret to the Fab 5 we call the NOAA magnetic field calculator. I'm not going to open it up right now, but if you request the links and the resources, and you click on this link, it'll take you to NOAA's magnetic field calculator, and it will allow you to type in your location, or like, again, just type in Half Dome, California. And you can select the date, like today's date, and it will give you today's reading of your magnetic angle. So before you go off into the woods, even though, hey, you can only get your hands on a USGS map from like, say, 2015 for a particular area that you want to navigate into, you can still take your little pencil and update the GM angle based on the information that you get from the NOAA magnetic calculator, so that you can adjust your GM angle for your map and compass to function together.
Andrew, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Members, thanks so much for your kind interaction in the chat, and really appreciate everybody's work. Take care. We'll see you next week at 6 o'clock.
You guys have a great evening.
Part
Be
2.
safe out there. Take care next week. Adios.